Jaylen Brown has an issue with analytics, and we're going to get into this situation today. Jaylen Brown versus analytics. What is going on? Why is my man Jaylen Brown getting disrespected around these parts, man? Why? We're going to get into all that, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on this Jaylen Brown versus analytics debate and all that. But before I get started on that, I want to tell you guys to hit that subscribe button, like, comment, and share. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell anybody to support my channel. Ladies and gentlemen, over the weekend, we got a little bit of a I want to say altercation, debate on the internet streets with analytics and Jaylen Brown. And you know, look, man, Jaylen Brown, it feels like Jaylen Brown over the last few weeks or so, he might be, he's probably turning into maybe the most disrespected star player in the league. Definitely, he's starting to become polarizing, because a lot of people, the eye test people, will tell you that this dude is a top 10 to 15 player in the league. And then you got these analytics, these people that are into the math and the numbers and the data, because the data and the analytics don't seem to be high on Jaylen Brown. They'll probably tell you that Jaylen Brown is way overrated and all of this stuff. And for those of y'all that didn't catch on, there was a report. I guess it was I want to say Bobby Marks. You know, he was on a SiriusXM NBA Radio. And then he did an interview, and then during the interview, he mentioned how he talked to an analytics guy, and then this analytics guy said that Jaylen Brown will be the 7th best player on the team. And that kind of got everyone riled up, including Jaylen Brown. He saw the post on NBA Central. He quoted a post, and then he kind of said some things on the post. If I can bring it up, hold on, people, hold on for a minute. But on the post, he talked about how analytics nowadays used to discredit and control narratives and roll the ball out. None of these guys are better than me on both ends of the court. Who does he work for? You know, so Jaylen Brown ended up being upset, and then he had some other things to say. You know, he's talked about how he's the best two-way player in the league, and then how I've been in the league 10 years and I've won more than anyone in the league. And then Bobby Marks responded to him, trying to kind of defend himself, talking about how he supports Jaylen Brown and all this stuff. And then Jaylen Brown retweets him, and he talks about state your source. And so Jaylen Brown is just going off, riled up, you know, and I get it. And if I were Jaylen Brown, I'd be doing the same thing, because Jaylen Brown, for a guy that this past season averaged 28 points a game, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, led Boston to a 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, despite not having Jason Tatum for 75 to 80% of the season. And it feels like people are just trying to downgrade his name. They're trying to talk down on him. They're trying to tell you that the analytics are telling you that he's not an impactful player. You know, there's this website called Data Baller that I've seen people use, and then they'll bring up, you know, his on-off numbers, and then they'll tell you that with Jaylen Brown on the court, the Boston Celtics are a +16 or +6, you know, per 100 possessions. And then when he's off the court, the Celtics are a +15. You know, so the Celtics without Jaylen Brown are apparently they're 15 points better with him off the court, and with Jaylen Brown on the court, they're +6. And that kind of gets people to say, oh, you know, maybe Jaylen Brown ain't that impactful. That maybe Jaylen Brown is overrated, and he's not really a true star. You know, that's kind of the narrative that people talk about, you know, with Jaylen Brown. And look, I'll be honest with Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown's one of my favorite players in the league. I've been a big fan of Jaylen Brown since he's been in the league. I was a fan of him when he was in high school, you know, playing for Wheeler High in Atlanta, in Cobb County. You know, so I've been a Jaylen Brown fan, and I'm still am a big Jaylen Brown advocate. But I'll be lying to you if I didn't tell you that this dude didn't have some flaws in his game. And look, in some instances when it comes to these advanced stats, I do think there's a little bit of merit to the advanced stats. When it comes to Jaylen Brown and that. Look, I don't think Jaylen Brown, if you want to look at a couple of flaws in his game, he's a very good scorer, right? We all know he can put the ball in the hole. He can get to the basket. He can hit mid-range shots. He can get hot from three. But the one thing about Jaylen Brown that probably is a kind of hindrance in his game. He's not really much of a playmaker. He's not really a high assist guy that's going to give you 7, 8, 9 assists a game. And he's going to turn over the ball. He's going to have a little tunnel vision-y, and he'll drive into traffic with no plan a little bit. And so he's not really a high-end playmaker. And look, man, there's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone can be a high-end scorer and a playmaker. Like a Luka Doncic or a Kate Cunningham, right? Or, a Nikola Jokic, or to a lesser degree a Giannis. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. And so the playmaking aspect of Jaylen Brown's game is a little bit lacking. He's not really a great ball handler. I think he's improved as a ball handler, but he's not a great ball handler. And defensively, off the ball, he can get a little lost here or there. So he's not real. So you can maybe argue that he's not really as good defensively as his reputation kind of tells you that he is. He's not really a lockdown guy. He can get lost off the ball and all of that. But those are flaws in his game. And look, man, most of these players in the league have flaws. Most players, star players, have a little flaw. Most guys are high-end scorers, but they're not really the greatest defenders. And like Jalen Brunson, who won the NBA championship. Jalen Brunson to me is a top 7 or 8 player in the league. He has weaknesses. He's small. He's not a good defender. You have to hide him. And guess what the Knicks did? They successively complimented Jalen Brunson's flaws. They hit him well, and he wasn't really the defensive liability, throughout most of the run that people kind of thought he would be. And Karl-Anthony Towns got better defensively. And so that team in New York was perfectly suited to hide, Jalen Brunson and his flaws, especially on the defensive end. And so I say this to say with Jaylen Brown is, yeah, he has some flaws in his game. I get it. But we got to put some respect on this man's name, man. I'm sorry. A dude who averages 28 a game without Jason Tatum, a guy that since he's been in the league, the Boston Celtics have been a playoff team every season. I mean, what are we doing here? The guy, people can nitpick his impact in the on-off numbers, and they can look at Data Baller, and people want to go to these little analytic websites to come up with data and all this stuff. We gotta put some respect on Jaylen Brown's name and what he's been able to do for the Boston Celtics, man. I'm sorry. I am not gonna allow people to crap on Jaylen Brown's name and what he brings as a player. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna allow it. This guy, Jaylen Brown, and look, we can debate as far as where people rank him as a basketball player and all of this. And look, when it comes to analytics, look, I understand that analytics is a prominent thing in today's game now compared to where it was 10 to 15 years ago. That's just the facts. And for me, I even use analytics to come up with my opinions. I go to NBA.com and I look at offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating, what a lineup looks like when they're on the court per whatever possessions, what's a on off numbers. I look at that type of stuff too. I'm not gonna be in denial. I'm not gonna act like analytics ain't useful, because it is. I think analytics has become a big part of the NBA and really in sports. I think analytics is become a big part of, how people consume their information, and understandably so. And so I'm not going to deny that analytics ain't important, but to use analytics to make it your end all be all when it comes to analyzing a player and talking about what a player looks like when he's on the court and compared to where he is off the court, I just think we're losing a plot here when it comes to the analytics. And when I see Jaylen Brown online on Twitter defending himself against what the analytics say about him, I don't blame him. I really don't, man. I just don't. And I think for Jaylen Brown, look, when we're ranking players in the NBA, there's probably about 16 players, if I'm being honest, that if anyone told me that player was better than Jaylen Brown, I would not bat an eye. And the players that I'm talking about, if you're asking me what players that I would say, if you told me that player was better than Jaylen Brown, I wouldn't bat an eye. I think the players that you're looking at is Victor Wembanyama, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, Luka, Giannis, Anthony Edwards, Cade Cunningham, Jalen Brunson, that's 8 guys. Steph Curry, that's 9 guys. Kawhi Leonard, that's 10 guys. Jason Tatum, that's 11 guys. Kevin Durant, 12 guys. Donovan Mitchell, 13 guys. Tyrese Maxey from the Philadelphia 76ers, 14 guys. And I'm going to add Karl Anthony Towns of the New York Knicks, and I'll add Tyrese Halliburton. So that's 16 guys. If you told me that those 16 guys were better than Jaylen Brown today, I would not argue. I would understand it. But after that, those 16 guys, Jaylen Brown is in that conversation after those 16 guys. And to me, that's kind of where I look at Jaylen Brown as a player. Like he's between the 15th to 20th best player in the league. I think that's where I have him. That's where he should be. And the resume that he's put together in this league tells you that he should be in that 15 to 20 range when it comes to ranking NBA players. And you look at a guy that's a 4-time All-Star, 2-time. Actually, no. Let me take that back. I want to say he's a 6-time All-Star. Maybe he's a 4. I want to say 6-time All-Star. I could be wrong about that, but he's around a 4 to a 6-time All-Star. He's made an All-NBA team twice. And the Boston Celtics, every year, you can pencil them in to win 50 games, 50-plus games a season. Jaylen Brown has been a first or second best scoring option on them teams. A guy that gives you consistently 23 to 25 points a game every year. And so, this is a guy that can put the ball in the basket. And last time I checked, when it comes to these analytics that want to tell you that Jaylen Brown is his on-off numbers or this or that they're better with him off than on, the one thing about the analytics that they don't tell you about is a guy's ability to put the ball in the basket. And a guy that can put the ball in the basket when it's clutch time. And I've seen Jaylen Brown many times in his career, and especially in the playoffs, make big shots in big moments in big games. Now, if people want to throw out the series he had against the Philadelphia 76ers, the last 4 games of the series, I get it. That was not his finest outing. And I can't defend the Boston Celtics blowing a 3-1 series lead to the Sixers and then losing in the first round. And so I can't defend Jaylen Brown on that, but there's no denying that this dude has been successful in big games, and he's helped Boston win, including winning a championship in 2024, him being the MVP. This is a fine NBA Finals MVP. And he won a championship. And he was the Finals MVP against the Dallas Mavericks, against Luka Doncic. And Jaylen Brown was the best player in the series. And we're just going to play with this dude's name like this? I mean, what are we doing? What are we doing? Now, that also isn't stopping the Boston Celtics for putting them on the trading block. And they reportedly they went after Giannis, and understandably so. You know, the Boston Celtics went after Giannis. They tried to get him. They didn't get him. He ended up going to Miami. And so now there's a little bit of a chicken in their head situation, because now Boston is kind of in this situation where you kind of alienated Jaylen Brown. He's upset. He kind of feels disrespected, and I don't blame Jaylen Brown for this. And Boston is kind of at a point where you might have to move him for something less, or if you don't find an offer that you like, you might have to reel in feelings and trying to get Jaylen Brown on board, and that could be tough. So Boston could be finding themselves in a little bit of a tough situation. And look, I understand where Boston is at, man. You know, in this cap environment, it's hard to win at a high level when you paying Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum both $50 to $60+ million. Both of them on the supermax, and you got that feel in your roster. You gotta have depth issues. Like, it's hard. Like, it's gonna be hard to put together the right roster that you want to put around these two to be a championship contender. And so I think Boston is in a little bit of a tough situation. I think they looked at the last 2 seasons. They lost in the second round to the New York Knicks, and then this past season they lose in the first round to the Sixers. And they kind of concluded their team ain't good enough, so we got to make some changes. And Jaylen Brown has arguably maybe the best value on the market. You know, it's between him and Derek White, right? And so, you know, I understand where Boston is at and why they're looking at moving him. It makes some sense. I understand it. But whatever Boston does, it should not dissipate, you know, Jaylen Brown's value as a player, man. I think Jaylen Brown's a very good player. I think this dude is one of the top 20 players in the league, at worst. You know, 15 to 20 players in the league. And I think Jaylen Brown should get his just due, man. And, like, you know, with these analytics, man, when I see these analytics trying to tell you that Derek White is a better player than Jaylen Brown because he has a higher plus minus, because he has a higher EPM. I mean, what are we losing the plot here? No one with sense can watch the Boston Celtics and tell me that Derek White's a better player than Jaylen Brown. I mean, come on, man. Really? What are we doing? And so, look, this Jaylen Brown versus analytics debate is amusing to me. And the Jaylen Brown dislike is kind of also been amusing to me. There are some people that thinks he's awesome, and there are other people that'll tell you he's overrated and that he's not even he's a negative asset, and that he's overrated and he's not a star. You know, people have their own opinions when it comes to Jaylen Brown. But for me, despite Boston looking at moving him, Jaylen Brown's gonna make it whether he's playing for the Boston Celtics or whether he gets traded elsewhere. Jaylen Brown's going to add some value to a team. And whoever gets this dude, that team's going to be very happy. And that's all I got to say about that.